There's a huge swathe of events going on at the moment, and there seems to be a common theme about them. And I thought it would be quite interesting to look at this briefly. And the common theme is a desire to big up the events. I mean, some of them are big anyway, but instead of making them personal, instead of making them human, we're making them about a big idea. And the problem is, the people who are running our societies already have their big ideas. That's what's got us into trouble. The big idea. Brexit. Or invasion, siege. These are the big ideas. And what gets lost, or even marching, from the river to the sea, there's a big idea. What gets lost in the big ideas are the human beings and the personal stories and the personal identities of people. That's what gets lost. And it's actually the personality and the vulnerability of individuals that changes the world. The big ideas, you don't get a clash of big ideas. One big idea that's got the ear of authority is the one that wins. But that big idea will be influenced by personal stories. Netanyahu will be influenced by the personal stories that he sees around him, and that he and the names that he hears. It's the names which call out. So this is why it is such a good idea to put up photographs and names. I see it's on one of the, or these pictures on one of the newspapers this morning of the children who have been captured by Hamas. But why are we not seeing the children who have been killed or wounded by the Israeli bombings? The same thing is true, frankly, of COVID. The current investigation, the current inquiry is all about statistics. And you'd think that the real people who were suffering during the COVID crisis were in number 10, were running the government. The real people who were suffering in the COVID crisis were the people who were in care homes, were the people who found themselves in hospitals on ventilators, were the families of those people who were not allowed to see them, and so on. And if we were to hold a proper COVID inquiry, then we would be using those names. We would be having photographs of those people and how they suffered. Because actually it becomes a self-indulgent conversation about the people with power. The people with power are deluded into thinking that they are in control. And what we discover, of course, from the COVID inquiry is that Boris felt very much out of control, and that Dominic Cummings was frustrated he didn't have enough control, and so on. It's all about control. If we want to change history, if we want to change events, we need to personalise them. So what we've got at the moment is an obsession with, I think, 3 particular areas. 1, rewriting or reversing events. That's absurd. 2, virtue signalling, which of course we get in huge measure from people like Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham. Or navel gazing, which of course we get with Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson. Changing attitudes is about personalising events. It's only when events become personal that the people in control recognise and change their minds. It's only when we realise how small we are. There's actually even a word for that. It's oculistic. When we have an oculistic recognition of our own stature, when we recognise that our opinion is not hugely important. Our opinion is not hugely important. But who we are is. So even in large numbers, our opinion, the slogans, are not important because they will be ignored by the people in charge. It's nice to feel the camaraderie of a big march, but it doesn't do anything today. It doesn't surprise or confront the people with the power because they've already got their own slogans. They're already self-obsessed with their own importance. They don't need to pay attention to a march, which anyway is controlled by the police. The aims of a march as well, I think, are not specific. They're general. And by the time that march takes place, the events have already moved on. And telling Netanyahu to have a ceasefire, of course, at this moment is pointless. It's virtue signalling. It's never going to happen. Telling him to do something for individuals, now that might happen. Showing him photographs of individually named children who are in danger, that might happen. And he might then recognize that a humanitarian corridor should be arranged, that he has a responsibility to take in refugees from Gaza. If we could only change his mind about that. Because Israel is a caring, thoughtful, modern country, a leading bridge builder in the Middle East, and it is being submerged into this sloganized obsession where people cannot challenge the government with their own slogans. So waving a Palestinian flag in Mir Shearim invites the police to bash Hasids, the Haredi. There's appalling scenes of the Haredi being victimized, those particular ultra-Orthodox Jewish people who do not accept the state of Israel and yet live in, for example, the very Orthodox, very Frum area of Jerusalem. And there's footage turning up in various news outlets of the police beating up these people. Why? Because both sides are catapulted into sloganizing and to waving flags and stuff. It doesn't do anything in today's world. Flags are not the way forward, I'm afraid. I like flags. I've got one here myself. I like flags. I think they're a very good shorthand for who we support, where we find our camaraderie. That's important. But it's not going to change the minds of the people in power. The people in power change their minds because they are personally affected, because of vulnerability, because of not because of fear. They are not frightened. The only way to get to the hearts of people, to change them, is to change their emotions. And you do that by directing people to personality. It doesn't matter which side of the event you're on. And by the way, on both sides there is so much fluff. As there is, of course, in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. But the Russian-Ukraine conflict in some ways is simpler to deal with because it was so clear there was an aggressor and there was a response. And Zelenskyy has, for the most part, been careful enough not to take his battle back into Russia. At that point, again, we would have a problem. The Netanyahu situation is an offensive terrorist act on October the 7th, which is then followed by an offensive act into Gaza and a belief that there can be the collective punishment of the Gazan people. This is then fueled by the arch right-wing activists in the Likud party who are putting out these extraordinary pamphlets. And it's not that there's just a pamphlet a couple of days ago, which came out last night, but that there's pamphlets going back through time. I made a video about this. It's not just one pamphlet. There's 3 going back over the last 20 years. And they're all an horrific idea that the Palestinians in Gaza can be displaced and rehoused elsewhere. That's ethnic cleansing. Now, is that something that Benjamin Netanyahu espouses and promotes? Probably not. Probably it is a pamphlet put out by a small part of the Likud party. But we know that the Likud party was built up in hatred and nastiness. We know that. It was started by Menachem Begin. After all, Menachem Begin's early years were couched in terrorism. Be in no doubt, Menachem Begin, that Prime Minister of Israel, was a terrorist. Maybe a terrorist who turned over a new leaf, but nevertheless, his youth was defined by the terrorism of the Irgun. And what is interesting about Menachem Begin is his relationship with Yasser Arafat, with the PLO, and so on. But his relationship with Yasser Arafat and his relationship with other world leaders. It's that personal connection which changes everything. I don't think Menachem Begin was a saint in any way. But that move from terrorism to statesmanship is possible. And if it's possible for Menachem Begin, it's possible for the leaders of Hamas. It's possible for the leaders of Hezbollah. It's possible in Yemen. And we've also seen it in Ireland. It is possible to change. And once the change has happened, should we then be looking over our shoulder and constantly challenging people with what they did in the past? I think at that point we have to help the people who have been hurt, wounded, killed, the families of those who've been killed. But there has to come a point where we accept that people have changed. If we can't accept that people change, we cannot move forward. And that means society needs to help those people who have been badly hurt, badly injured, or whose families have been killed in these appalling terrorist events. But we need to move forward. And we need to move forward without forgetting the individuals. So we need to get away from the statistics, get towards individual identities and photographs. And the people putting the photographs around London are doing the right thing. But those who support the Palestinians in Gaza should be doing the same thing. And it's not a competition to see who has the most suffering. It's simply a way to humanize and personalize the suffering that is shared. And we should be doing that not only in Israel and Gaza, we should also be doing it in Russia and in Ukraine, because, I teach many Ukrainians, I teach many Russians, and these are societies fractured by the madness of Putin. And in the same way that the Israeli society is fractured by the madness of Hamas, by the madness of Netanyahu and the Likud party. Only humanity, only personalizing these tragedies with photographs, with names, with stories of the people who are suffering because of the madness of those in control. Only that will change the power dynamic. Not a slogan, not a march, not, frankly, YouTube, I think. The moment I put up a YouTube video, most people don't watch it. Most people just think, oh, there's the title. He's on one side or he's on the other side. And some of the comments are extraordinary. And you think those comments were written without somebody actually listening to the stuff that I go on about. Yes, I'm not terribly important. Let's go back to that word, archaeolistic. Archaeolistic is recognizing that we are small. We are small. But a lot of small people can expose the vulnerability of the world, can get the people in power to change their mind, but not by slinging slogans around, not by our numbers, but by our humanity, and by identifying, by personalising these figures.